Living consciousness, opportunity in shifting perspective. Good morning. It is Living Consciousness, and this is our half-hour monthly program where we get to share with you concepts around living consciousness. And if you want more information regarding all that we do with this, please visit our site, bickfordcovington.com. And I'd like to start off with welcoming my partner, Dr. Kurt Bickford. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm Dr. Tracy Covington. So we're here to share with you some living consciousness concepts and somewhat highlight our upcoming one-day seminar, which is February 15th next month. But we really would like to discuss today some pretty important concepts around how we grew up and what was all involved in that, because there's a lot more to it than I think many people realize. Agreed, Dr. Bickford?
Absolutely agreed. Ignorance is one of the major problems on this planet.
And ignorance around our staging, our developmental process, what's important for childhood. So I guess would be really kind of great to start off with is what we as psychologists, and Dr. Bickford's a neuropsychologist as well as a clinical psychologist, and I am a clinical psychologist. So understanding child development is kind of our backbone. And there is some very specific developmental phases to childhood. We actually have developmental phases all our life. But
it never stops.
It never stops. And yet there's some critical staging we refer to in childhood. So I was wanting to know, maybe we could start off today of giving that base foundation in what is critical staging for childhood and developmental process. If you could give us some understanding of that.
Well, because everything is mediated through the human brain, brain development becomes absolutely critical to who we become as adults. And who we become as adults is directly correlated to how we're treated as children. And that even starts in utero. And so the environment that we raise our children in determines who they become as adults to a very large extent. And one of the purposes of doing radio shows like this, as well as committing to our monthly seminars to teach principles of psychology, states of consciousness, and higher states of consciousness, such as enlightenment, is to start the process of educating, to move us from ignorance, which leads to all kinds of problems, including mental illness and the way we treat one another, and all the way up to war and poverty and illness. So in learning psychology, which is core to everything that has to do with being human, that is our commitment. And so when we look at how we treat children, I mean, maybe we should first just jump to how your life is as an adult, and just kind of look at the quality of your life and how you feel about that life. You know, ask yourself some questions about the quality of your physical life, the quality of your mental life, and your spiritual health. Ask yourself about the quality of your relationships, your primary relationships, your friendships, and your collegial relationships. How do you treat others in that regard? What's your satisfaction with your career or your purpose in life? What's your level of enjoyment of life? Is life something you wake up to and are excited about, or is it one of dread? What about your ability to recreate and have fun, to enjoy this beautiful planet and the beautiful people on this planet?
Life balance.
How about your ability to deal with and handle whatever life brings you? You know, do you succumb to a little stress and give up, or do you rally your internal forces? And a lot of that has to do with what you learned as a child. You know, have you been able to fulfill your purpose on this planet? And when you're mistreated as a child, And that mistreatment runs the gamut from neglect and abandonment to all the way to corporal punishment and abuse and sexual trafficking and a number of other things that destroy children. When we look at these issues, we see that the core to this is what damage is done to the human brain. And we have to know that the human brain is developing. It constantly develops. It doesn't fully wire up until about age 28 to 30. So all the events of life, and especially those early life events, and when we say early life events, let's just say pre-8, leave indelible marks on the psyche of the human being. So all conflict, all war, all hatred, all sense that one is better than another or less than another, all has to do with this early life treatment. And so when we look at probably one of the most obvious issues, it has to do with punishment, or what people euphemistically call disciplining children. And let's just say out loud that children don't need to be disciplined. That's an absolutely misnomer. It has to do with the weak self-esteem of those who are providing the discipline.
Wow, that's a very powerful statement.
It has nothing to do with the child themselves. And when we look at the state of the world right now, there are 24 countries who have banned corporal punishment and spanking of children, both in the school system and within the home. 24. Now there's 200 and something, I don't know how many countries, but almost 300 countries in the world, and 24 have banned spanking. It used to be 25, but New Zealand repealed their corporal punishment laws, so they felt that they still need to beat their children, which, as we know, isn't going to work out very well. Sweden now is the country with the most long-standing laws against corporal punishment of children, now 30 plus years. And so they are the first country with a full generation of people who have never been hit. And if we look at all the parameters of the quality of life, Sweden is always at the top of the list.
And they've done some very significant longitudinal studies.
Highly significant.
On
yes.
the impact of removing
Correct.
corporal punishment.
Correct. And so when you just look at that correlation, you start to think, well, maybe we're on the wrong path. And so we have to ask ourselves all kinds of questions about what we do to our children and under what guise that is. And I have to say out loud that one of the major problems of that is culture, and within culture is religion. And that's particularly true here in the United States, where there is fear to really take on this issue. And the answer always is, well, America's not really ready to have that conversation. And you have to ask yourself why. Yeah. We are one of the most violent countries in the world, and how we treat our children early in their life leads to how we view life as an adult. And all the issues of fear and safety and security in this country really have to do with having been mistreated as a child. It has really very little with what's going on in the world. And we see the largest countries in the world are the ones who have yet to really address this question. That includes countries like China, like Russia, like India, and America, Canada. We've not addressed this issue. We keep avoiding it. And it's really just political. And for fear that if we take on the Christian church, that somehow we'll lose our political standing. And that's just cowardice.
I just want to put in a quick note of an organization that we've been very... it's been a wonderful resource for us. I just want to put out the website. It's nospank.net, and it's chock full of wonderful research and information. It was originally put together by educators and parents, and Jordan Weirk heads that, and great booklets he'll send you and great PDFs you can download, and he really addresses a lot of the issues and ignorance around why childhood shouldn't hurt.
Should never hurt.
And
right.
Some of the ignorance as far as how biblical scripture has been used to support in an ignorant kind of way, and he kind of breaks that apart.
We have, and it's just sad to say this out loud, but it's true. We have industries in our country here in America that are all about promoting the physical abuse of children. There's a company run by a couple in Oklahoma that they manufacture nylon whips, and they call them rods, and they promote this throughout the fundamentalist Christian churches in America. There are books that are promoted through fundamentalist Christianity about beating the will out of children starting at a very, very early age.
So Dr. Bickford, just real quickly, beating the will, what are we seeing when we describe something as a willful child? So I know that's another expertise of yours and understanding.
Well, it's one of the great lies. And we really have to start calling it what it is. It's one of the great lies. Children are not willful. That is a projection of the adult psyche. Children are not willful. Children don't have the capacity. They don't have the brain development to be willful. And in willfulness, what we're basically saying is that they have a separate consciousness that they're capable of making decisions that are intended to frustrate the parent. No, that is so far from the truth. They do not have the neurological structure in order to do that. It isn't until about age 8 that the frontal lobes are starting to wire up, and that's where those kinds of decisions of willfulness are made. So when we start beating on children who are infants and toddlers and young children, what we're doing actually is creating brain damage. And by brain damage, it's a wiring of the brain towards fight or flight versus a wiring of the brain towards compassion, towards a sense of self, towards autonomy, towards the ability to even think through things. And when we look at the whole world of bullies, the world of learning disabilities, the world of attention deficit disorders, most of these are really anxiety disorders. They have nothing to do with attentional or learning disorders. They are learned because the child's attention is now on safety and security rather than on learning. And that's their whole purpose, is to learn. So we've got to look at this from a whole different point of view. This is one of the saddest things that's going on in the world, and it's the bane of the human culture. I mean, if you think this all the way through, if you hit an animal, that's called cruelty. If you hit an adult, that's called battery or assault. But if you hit a child, that's called discipline.
Here's a great point. My goodness.
That's mental illness.
When you put it like that,
and we have to be very, very clear. To beat a child is an act of mental illness. So, and ignorance. And we have to be very, very honest about this. And so we have to start asking questions. What if everything you've been taught about being human is a lie? What if everything that you've ever learned, everything you've come to know, everything that you say you believe in, your way of life, your view of yourself, of your relationships, of everything you believe to be important, has really been based in falsehood, in distortion, in misperception, or a lie? And that's what's going on here. We know so much about how children develop and what is good for their development on the one hand, and yet we can't get it into the general population on the other. And as a result, we have children who are being destroyed generation after generation after generation. And it's all due to ignorance. And that's why we provide this service.
I just want to back up a minute because, again, this is so powerful.
Sorry, I went on a rant there.
No, that was awesome. Excuse me. You had mentioned that this is a projection of the adult psyche. And I'm not sure if everybody, as far as our listeners, understand projection or psyche. If you could break that down, just because it is such an important point.
Psyche is a construct of what it is to be human. It's that part of self that interacts and interfaces with the world, with the environment, and it is made up of all of its learnings throughout its existence. So one of the hallmarks of being human is that often, out of ignorance, when we have wounds, when we carry psychological wounds, and of course these would be wounds based on how we were treated as children, rather than admitting to and owning those wounds, we often deny them, and in denying them, we see them in others.
And this is like the people who say, "Oh man, I was spanked as a child and I turned out okay."
Correct. That's just denial.
Yeah.
That's flat out denial. And you and I, we treat people every day who will come in and talk about how they were treated as children, and then they will tell us that they deserved it.
Yeah.
And that it made them a better human being.
Yeah.
And yet, when you look at the quality of their life and the fact they're sitting in our office, it didn't turn out well.
Yeah.
They are harming others, and everywhere they go, they judge others, they prejudge others, they condemn others. That's what the basis of hatred and prejudice is all about. And we can broaden this thing out to every aspect of any culture in which there is not equality. And by equality, I'm not talking about an equality of a standard of living. I'm talking about an equality in how they're treated and respected. And the rest is on them to work their way up. But if every country held each person's life with reverence, we would have a different quality, a different standard of life in this world. And all the money that we spend on defense and wars and conflict could then be rerouted into caring for others, and that would change everything. But because we brutalize one another, starting at a very, very early age, we believe conflict and hatred and safety are the primary issues of life, and that's a huge distortion.
So then to roll forward again, you have mentioned that the significant damage to the brain, and actually there's now studies that show PET scans and things that compare what would be referred to as a healthy child's brain, one that wasn't hit fear-based in the childhood raising, versus a brain that was. And maybe you could quickly share with us what we see on these scans. It's horrifying.
It's only through proper stimulation that the brain grows in a natural way.
Yeah.
And so by the time a child is 4-ish, 5-ish, it's attained about 70% of its total volume or growth potential. And yet when we neglect, abandon, abuse our children in a systematic way, which of course is what we do under the guise of discipline and our own mental illness, our own wounded self-esteem, what happens is that those brains atrophy. They don't grow, they don't expand. And so when you look at a functional MRI or you look at a PET scan, you see a smaller brain in a child who has received severe punishments. And then, of course, that in turn leads to all kinds of cognitive problems, including pronounced learning disabilities, so-called attention deficit disorders, and ultimately leads to severe, significant psychological problems with it, which then lead to problems of interrelating with others. Every kid you see at school who bullies somebody is being bullied in their life by adults.
They're the most pained children there.
Absolutely. And yet we keep denying this, and we keep saying that, well, that child is a bad child. That's not a bad child. That's a child who's merely acting out that which is happening to them. Yeah. It is bad parents, bad parents, bad step-parents, bad parental models. And that includes our educational system that allows this to happen. In America, for example, 30 states have banned corporal punishment in our schools. Well, that means 20 states have not. 20 states continue to beat children regularly in their school system.
My goodness. So you have made the point about the brain development of a child that has healthy parameters. They often are seeking through curiosity. So basically, anything we do that shuts down that curiosity is going to deter then
creates brain damage. So if we take a 3-year-old toddler, for example, by their nature, because instinctively within each of us is that desire to stimulate the brain. Why? Because then the brain grows. So stimulation for a toddler is a sensory experience. They look at everything. They want to touch everything. They want to put everything in their mouth, in their nose, in their ears. They want to see what that object is, what it's about. And if a parent who is perhaps impulsive or ignorant smacks that child on the hand, that will cause that child to stop being curious, to stop stimulating their brain for up to 9 months.
Wow.
Well, when you look at that and you broaden that out as a learning curve, what happens of 9 months of diminished stimulation produces 9 months of diminished neurological cortical growth.
Wow. That's serious.
Just one pop on the hand. That's it.
Wow.
And you've created a wave of destruction for that child cortically, which will then lead to all kinds of problems in
those
learning.
are those parents that say, well, I just know they're just pushing it. They're manipulating.
They project adult motives onto children, and the children do not have adult motives.
So really what we see is what this is identification as being manipulative or willful is really the proper functioning of a curious brain.
Exactly.
Okay.
And therefore, not dysfunctional, not mean-spirited, not wrong, not broken. So this ignorance that we keep propagating, that children have the capacity of adults to think things through and are doing things on purpose, is just ignorance. And I think in some cases it truly is mental illness.
So in this, you often have a very famous phrase you say in a lot of these lectures about war-torn countries compared to abusive home. I was wanting to know if you'd share that.
Well, as we think this through, and as we have so much now more information due to research and observation, we see that children who are raised in an unhealthy home in which corporal punishment is a standard in the home, those children have more psychological problems than children who are raised in nurturing homes, but in war-torn countries.
That's just amazing.
Yeah, and it's because the very people who are there to take care of us, to protect us, are the abusers. Versus in a war-torn country, if you come in from a nurturing home, the abusers are outside the home, and so the child still has the safety and the security of a loving home. That promotes normal brain development, contrary to what happens within the home, where the war-torn country is actually the supposed safety of the home itself. So it causes all kinds.
It's something to certainly ponder, and the best is to be educated and understand these things. That's again why we want to share this so deeply today.
Well, we have to ask ourselves, why isn't, and it doesn't matter what country you live in, why isn't our country promoting the truth about development? And
especially the level we understand it now.
Especially the level we understand it now. And the only answer is that they who are in control and in charge, one, are cowards, and two, do not see the betterment of the country as their calling, but rather the betterment of themselves.
And isn't that them also self-preserving their belief that they're okay?
Correct.
So by staying in denial that somehow they're psychologically in the healthiest place, then of course they can't look at those aspects
Correct.
for child development.
Right. So everything they do is okay to do by virtue of the fact that they're okay. But that's denial. They're not okay. Anyone who's willing to mistreat another human being is not okay.
How about we expand that to anyone who's willing to abuse life on any level?
In any form.
In any form.
That includes the abuse of the planet. That includes abuse of our food resources. That includes the abuse of our children.
Causes me to pause. So then we're going to roll forward a little bit here so now we're adults and now we're realizing we're coming out of denial that we've been, our curiosity was shut down. We might have had some limitations in our brain development. What do we do? Oh my goodness. And how do we shift? And this is really where the concepts of living consciousness that we've been teaching for years now rolls into place. Radical self-acceptance, healing. I would like to know if you'd just give us some high points regarding how do we roll forward? How do we heal?
Well, life is complex. We can just say that out loud. And there's a huge difference between being a success in the world versus developing oneself as a human being. And all the emphasis in the world is on becoming a success in that world. And in that we have to deny then the growth of the self. But it's through the growth of the self that all things healthy occur. So anyone who is discovering that they are unhappy in their life, in any aspect, as we started off today, talking about relationships, to work, to purpose, to recreation, and having fun, anyone who struggles in any of those things needs help because of the complexity of it. And that help often comes in the form of accurate and truthful information. The world of psychology is one of those places. All things start with the self. It can't be any other way. And to the extent that I'm healthy, leads to healthy relationships, leads to a healthy productiveness, leads to a healthy recreational life. The three aspects of being human. And so getting help is important. Psychotherapy is an important place to be. And I know there are cultures and countries that think, what is all the self-absorption into trying to discover who we are?
That's a great point.
That is the only thing that is going to change this world. We keep emphasizing the wrong things. If we emphasize being personally healthy, everything else falls into place. So psychotherapy is a great place to start. Getting a truthful information in places like seminars, reading books, and reading books of experts. There is built into each one of us the truth. We all know the truth, and we know the truth of loving kindness. If you think about every religious figure throughout time, they all came from a position of love. All of them.
Yes.
Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, they all came from the position of love. And we as human beings, being as weak as we are, we follow religion as a way of trying to align our life. And yet it's our very religions that are becoming self-defeating in that. They promote the mistreatment of others. They promote conflict. Why? How? Specialness.
Good versus bad.
Good versus bad, every single time. And so I want to believe that I'm the good, and therefore everyone else is the bad.
So in moving to healthiness, it's about radical self-acceptance, exploration, understanding living consciousness truth,
Exactly.
Learning that we are the lid. We are our own lid, and we're our lid to what we are in our world.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Your self-esteem, your view of yourself is the lid on your life.
And this is a shift from being mindlessness, having mindlessness, to mindfulness.
Well said.
But again, tricky. So we again really encourage having a relationship in which you can work with that healing.
Correct. And expand that out even further. If you are following some authority and denying the subjective realization of the self, then you are likely misled. Quite likely misled. It's about the subjective realization of the truth. And in that is that we are all one. We are all the same. We are all equal. And any denial of that is part of that mental illness.
It's very powerful. And I'd like to kind of begin closing here with the phrase, a quote from Aristotle, that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom.
Exactly.
That finding the channels to knowing yourself is something you have to mindfully do.
Well, allow me to share a quote from the Buddha. And it goes something like this. Do not believe in anything simply because you heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. So says the Buddha.
So our upcoming seminar on how I learned to not like myself and the result of not being me, February 15th. Any further information you'd like to find out about is at our website at bigfordcovington.com. And we thank you so very, very much. We appreciate the interest out there in this information, and we appreciate so deeply that you would tune in and hear us. we wish you the best in the coming month. This is Living Consciousness. We'll be chatting to you in March.
Namaste.